Hey, Pokedad fan club, it's me, Pokedad, and it's been a little while since I've recorded some videos. I've been job hunting, and so it's kind of kept me from being able to do videos. And with nationals and everything, there's just not a lot of whole new decks. Most of the decks are all the same nowadays. So I'm doing. I did this last year, and so I wanted to repeat this year because rotation has been announced for next year, and so we want to talk about cards that will be missed from sets that are rotating. If you haven't heard, it's going to be XY base set through Phantom Forces, which a lot of people predicted. Some of us were hoping that Phantom Forces wouldn't rotate. I know that some people are real excited that Night March is rotating. Other people aren't so excited. But with new cards coming out like Karen to counter it, I wasn't so worried about Night March. Plus, most of the decks I play counter Night March pretty well. So I was kind of hoping Phantom Forces would make it another year, but it didn't. So we're losing a lot from that. And when we get to the Phantom Forces set, we'll talk about that. But the first set we want to look at is XY base set. Couple notable things I should mention before we even look at some of the cards here that are rotating is that what's not rotating. Been a lot of reprints in the trainer cards. Cards like Red Card is not rotating. Team Flare Grunt made it back in. So those are a couple of trainer cards. But what's even more amazing is that Evil Tall and Xerneas both have been reprinted, both the baby versions and the EX versions. And so, therefore, even though they were in base set, you will still be able to use them, which is, I know, actually, I'm a little more disappointed about that because I really wanted to see Evil Tall rotate. Even though I love Xerneas, I would have been willing to let go Evil Tall go at the expense of Xerneas. But nevertheless, they're all coming in. And in fact, Evil Tall and Xerneas are going to get break cards. So we'll look at those when we look at the next set. But let's go ahead and talk about what's rotating. There's not a lot in this set that was super used in competitive play other than Evil Tall and Xerneas from time to time. But let's go ahead and look at it. I put Chestnut and Delphox and Greninja in this mix, even though Chestnut and Delphox for the most part have not been used in competitive play, and Greninja just recently and in limited number here. But they are the starter Pokemon for XY base set, or I should say they're the stage 2 evolutions of the starter Pokemon. So it just seems like we should give them a fitting goodbye as we're kind of moving in from XY onto Sun and Moon. So let's just take a look at Chestnut. Chestnut had Spiky Shield. If the Pokemon is your active Pokemon, it does like 2 damage counters to the opponent. It's kind of like a what was the helmet, Rocky Helmet. It kind of did that. It also is similar to Dangerous Energy that's in play right now for dark types. He had Touchdown. But what made this card interesting is when the break came out. This card really was never used, and even when the break came out, it still wasn't really used. But I did see a couple little rogue decks, so I thought I would mention it. Delphox, on the other hand, was used a little bit more, especially at the beginning of XY, base XY, when the XY series started, but it's pretty much gone out of style, especially when Seismitoad came into print, because Rare Candy was very difficult to be able to use because of Seismitoad. And when also Octillery came out, it was much better to just have a stage 1 that could get you 5 cards back to your hand than a stage 2 that could get 6 with Mystical Fire. Though Mystical Fire and Blaze Ball both were pretty good at, Mystical Fire was a good ability and Blaze Ball was a good attack. It just really never really caught fire. And Delphox did get a break in the very last set that we just has just been released in Fates Collide. And so this card is seeing a little bit more use, but again, I wouldn't call Delphox Break more than just a rogue deck at best. It really hasn't seen much competitive play, though in casual play it's been seen a lot. Greninja, on the other hand, has been a card that's seen quite a bit of play. Greninja Break came out in Break Point and skyrocketed really high in price. I think it's lowered back down bit, but it was at one time $25 for the break. And most people were running a 2-2 split of this old Greninja from XY base set and the new Greninja from Breakpoint, and then using obviously Greninja Break. So this Greninja actually did see some play, and it actually in the early on saw some play too with Miltank, and using Miltank to kind of attack, and then using the Water Shurikens in the back to kind of, hit the bench. But other than that, this Greninja hasn't seen a whole lot of play, nothing super competitive other than the Greninja Break decks that just recently came out this year. Mega Blastoise, I should also mention that Megas were introduced in XY base set. We had Venusaur and Blastoise, and in the next set, Mega Charizard and Flashfire. But they never really caught on until Phantom Forces, because they had this rule where if you evolved them, you lost it. That was the end of your turn. So it wasn't until Spirit Links came out in Phantom Forces that actually made these playable. However, very, very briefly, Mega Blastoise did see some play around states, not this past year, but the year before, in an Archie's Ace in the Hole build. Matter of fact, Archie's Ace in the Hole won Worlds last year, but it was this Blastoise and Mega Blastoise deck that I think won a states somewhere last year, and that kind of got the Archie's Blastoise deck rolling. And so I wanted to give at least a little shout out to this Mega Blastoise, because it did see some play, although it was very, very briefly. Though the Blastoise EX and the Mega Blastoise and the Venusaur and the Mega Venusaur really never saw any play. Alright, however, that being said, we're now getting into our first competitive card that really, really is going to change the format. Trevenant got a break a couple sets ago, and same time as Greninja got a break, in fact. And Trevenant was actually usable before that. Matter of fact, before Lysander's Trump card got banned, Trevenant Shaman was a very, very solid deck, and that's all it was just hammers and Trevenant, and then using Shaman to set up, and then super scoop ups, and it was a very, very trolly deck. It made it very hard for your opponent to get any energy on board, because you could just keep using Lysander's Trump card to just keep throwing the hammers back out there. And so Trevenant used Tree Slam and Item Lock to just troll their opponent. Well, he got stronger and did very well this past state season with Trevenant Break, which also did spread damage 30 to everything. Combine that with the new Bursting Balloon, and Trevenant saw its height was here near the end of this season. Really took a lot of tournaments in states, and did well in regionals too. So Trevenant, you are the first one that we will have to say goodbye to. You will be greatly missed. We say goodbye to all these other ones, but Trevenant, we salute you, because you were one of the best cards from XY base set, and you will be missed. Actually, some of you probably won't miss him, but it's a very good card, regardless of how you feel about him. Another card that hasn't seen as much play recently, but last year saw a lot, was Aromatisse. There was a Fairy Toolbox deck. Mega Gardevoir actually won estates with Aromatisse. And so Aromatisse had a lot of options available to it, mostly in fairy forms, but there was a lot where they used the Rainbow Energy and Fairy Energy, and just did a toolbox form where you could pretty much use whatever you needed to beat your opponent. And so Aromatisse was very good, because you could combine it with Max Potion, transfer all the energy off, and then heal all the damage off of one of your Pokemon, and then transfer all the energy back. So Aromatisse was a very big staple card. Now, even though fairies haven't seen a lot of traction, people that play fairy decks know that Aromatisse is probably the epitome of and the backbone of a true fairy deck. And so with Aromatisse leaving the format, it is going to make the fairy builds look a little bit different. You're going to see stuff like Fairy Drop, or you're going to be seeing plays that don't use a lot of energy. The new Mega Gardevoir comes to mind, where you can have a Dimension Valley in play if it gets reprinted. We'll talk about that when we get to Phantom Forces. and then you only need one energy to attach to it, so it would make sense where you could just play a max potion on the Mega Gardevoir and then attach for turn and go your way like that. So Aromatisse, you will be definitely missed. As far as trainer cards, there wasn't a whole lot that rotated, but there was a couple, at least one big one, and we'll start with that. That would be Muscle Band. Muscle Band was, before Fighting Fury Belt came out and kind of replaced it, Muscle Band was almost in every deck. I mean, you saw Muscle Band in just about everything to give that 20 damage boost. Worked specifically good in fighting decks that had so many damage modifiers already. Muscle Band combined with Strong Energy, combined with Fighting Stadium, combined with Machamp from Furious Fist, and now you had stuff that was going, for one energy could be hitting uh, 50, 70, 90 damage, and then when you had stuff like Metacham, who could attack twice, his Yoga Kick could go, 92 times, easily knocking out uh, an EX. So Muscle Band, very, very useful. Now the only thing we really have to replace it is Fighting Fury Belt, which is only going to be used on basic Pokemon. And then Giovanni's Scheme is kind of like a Muscle Band in supporter form, but Muscle Band will be greatly missed. Now, not to be outdone, but just wasn't as played as much as Hard Charm. And Hard Charm is kind of like the opposite of Muscle Band. Hard Charm allowed you to reduce the damage of attacks from your opponent by 20. So very, very useful card in some decks because you needed to, if you could just stay alive, you could hit pretty hard already, but maybe you had lower HP than some of the other EXs. One of them that comes to mind is Florges EX. It could hit pretty hard, but it only had 160 HP at the time, well, during its reign, and so people would use Hard Charms and Klefki to kind of be used in to help it. And that's actually a Pokemon I didn't even think about, but Klefki is in this set, the old one that would make resistance to dark types -40 instead of just -20. So that was an interesting card, though it was a tech that only used in fairy decks, obviously. Shadow Circle here, very, very useful card. In dark decks, basically they had no weakness, so light, Eviltal's lightning weakness didn't come into play. Darkrai, dark fighting weakness didn't come into play, which made it very good, especially when you're playing like Landorus Bats or Manectric. Made Dark very strong and dominant, and even today Dark is still a very strong and dominant deck that you could pick up and use pretty easily. Shadow Circle leaving isn't going to be a big blow because there are other stadiums like Reverse Valley that Dark takes advantage of, and Shadow Circle wasn't always used, just in some builds, so it's not going to be a big loss, but it is still a loss for Dark type Pokemon. And then the final card I want to mention, it's not a very well played card, not used much, but it's very special to me because it was a card that I used to win a league challenge against my good friend Caleb Rice, and it dropped him to 5th. Even to this day, we say play Cassius, drop Caleb to 5th because of that. But Cassius allows you to take a Pokemon and everything attached to it and shuffle it back into your deck. Very, very useful in Seismitoad Giratina decks because if they took damage, you could just put them back in, bring up the next Seismitoad, and keep Quaking Punching away or using Chaos Wheel. And so Cassius was, a good supporter. I thought it was reprinted in Generations, but when I went back and looked at the set, indeed it wasn't. So that means Cassius is indeed going bye-bye, even though Team Flare Grunt and almost all the other supporters from XY base set are staying. So anyway, guys, this is my salute to saying bye to XY base set, as this will be rotating out and these cards will no longer be in standard format, though they will continue to see play in expanded format. Until next time, I'll have my next set review up. Flashfire, we'll talk about what's leaving the format there. Until next time, talk to you later. This is Pokedad signing out. Bye.